I am now going to sit a full Manhattan GRE test. And as you may know, I scored a 340 in the real thing, but that's absolutely no guarantee that I'll score perfectly here, partly because I'm going to try and explain a little bit as I'm going along. This will be a full walkthrough, 2 math sections, 2 verbal sections. The only difference is I'll be saving the essays for another day. I don't want that to be the focus of this video. I'll do other videos where I walk through the essay section. So I'll skip those, but aside from that, I'm going to do a full Manhattan GRE test. So let's pick the timing. I'm going to do default and next. And if it brings up the essays, I'm just going to confirm. I'm just going to skip those. Yes, so it's now the essay section, which again, I will do in future videos. Very excited to do that. But for today, I wanted to focus on quant and verbal and give you a full walkthrough. I've got my OneNote, by the way, here, and my calculator. Here's the OneNote, here's the calculator for when I get onto the quant. So let's skip that and get into it. So we're going to start with the verbal here, 20 questions in 30 minutes. Do try and answer along with me if you can. That will be the most helpful way to watch this video. Next. Consider the spheres of human conduct carefully delineated and harmonized by the modern legal system. Delineated and harmonized. Which is based on the idea that one's personal freedom ends where it begins to something another person's freedom. So your freedom ends where it begins to impinge or begins to attack another person's freedom. And there we go, impinge. And it's a single blank, so I'm just going to pick it and move on. Impinge turned up, I think, in one of my vocab videos, so do check them out. Though he did his best to cheer her, his pep talk left her just as something as before. Well, obviously it didn't cheer her, so the opposite of cheering her up would be not bored, disconsolate. Great word. It means down, not cheerful. Chirpy is cheerful, and the rest are too strong. So disconsolate, down, a little bit depressed. Notice I'm going quite fast because I need the time for when we get to reading comp. Once the formerly nomadic people developed farming and settled in a valley rich in natural resources and protected from invaders, they were able to live a inveterate, I'm not sure what that means, fatuous, no, that's an insult, halcyon, I think that means idyllic, like paradise existence for hundreds of years. A period which was stopped only in the 20th century when contact with Westerners destroyed that way of life. Stopped or halted, scotched. Blown to pieces, demolished, stopped, scotched. Hindered means delayed, it's not strong enough because the Westerners destroyed that way of life. Okay, I haven't seen these questions. The something of the committee's review was shocking to someone who, until now had been something by her advisors. So we can't tell, so we have to pick the blanks in pairs. The impartiality, that means the fairness, was shocking to someone who until now had been coddled. That means kind of treated really well and cocooned, spoilt. Gallantry. Gallantry wouldn't make sense. That's bravery and courage. We're talking about a review, a committee review. Asperity is the bitterness. The bitterness of the review was shocking to someone who had been not forestalled. We're not talking about someone being stopped in their tracks. Neglected wouldn't go with asperity. But would coddled go? The bitterness of the review was shocking to someone who until now had been coddled. Ooh, this is tough. I think it might be these two. Because she was coddled by her advisors, as in they spoiled her and said, you're the best, you're the best. And so the asperity the bitterness, the sharpness of the review came as a shock. Like, huh? Me? But I thought I was so good. I think that makes sense. Whereas impartiality, why would they be shocking? Or why would that be shocking? You know, the fairness of the review wouldn't shock someone. I mean, it does contrast with being coddled, but I think it's more likely you're going to be shocked by asperity. That's pretty tough, actually. And to be honest, I'm only about 95% sure asperity does mean bitterness. But I think I'm going to have to go with it, just on the basis that impartiality, it could be that as well. I'm not sure. I'll go with this, but I'm not sure. Can't spend too much time. While one economist argues that the something of Western countries is that economic power naturally gravitates towards the erudite. The shortcoming? Erudite means educated, as opposed to being forcibly distributed through some arcane patriarchal order, like run by men. So we're praising Western countries here. So I wouldn't say shortcoming, we'd say advantage. The advantage of Western countries is that economic power naturally gravitates towards the educated, as opposed to the men. One can conceivably make a case for the opposite. Since the erudition education of individuals varies greatly from generation to generation, Western culture breeds variability, some word meaning that, instability, which many see as a disadvantage, whereas focus on fraternal brotherly ties is much less unpredictable, is much less variant, is much less unpredictable, capricious. So I was able to get those as I went, just by predicting where the author was going. Although never won to something life's pleasures, only recently had Paul devoted himself entirely to something pursuits. We don't know whether he's going for or abstaining from life's pleasures, so it's hard to guess here. Let's read the end. In years past, Paul had adeptly, skillfully balanced his love of fine wine and women. Okay, so we know that this person wants life's pleasures. So although never one to avoid and never one to eschew, to avoid, he was never eschewing, he was never avoiding life's pleasures. Only recently had Paul devoted himself entirely to hedonistic. Hedonistic means enjoying like wine, women, etc. In years past, Paul had balanced his love. So before, he balanced his enjoyment with a professional career, a good career. An exacting career means struggling and lots of effort put in. Nugatory means like worthless. It's balancing his love of his career with his love of wine. And that wouldn't make sense with a worthless career. Feckless, you're talking about a person rather than a career. So I think this is right. Okay. Obviously, I could check all that and add maybe 1% certainty, but I want to save the time. Let's do this one. So we've got a critical reasoning. Universal preschool is a misguided use of public funds. Controversial. This early academic focus will undermine the social, emotional, and mental development associated with a carefree early childhood. I can see your point of view. Furthermore, the economic burden on the state to fund such an ambitious undertaking will be overwhelming in both the short term and the long term, since the state has no way to offset the programme's costs. They're saying it's going to be really, really costly. I always say try and predict the answer, and they're saying that we want to weaken the idea that preschool will be an economic burden. Well, my prediction would be in the long run, it might pay off, right? You invest in kids' education, even though it's costly in the short run, in the long run, it will pay off. So that's my prediction. Let's see if we can find an answer. It doesn't have to match my prediction, just something along those lines. Students who attend preschool are more likely to complete high school than students who do not attend. Good answer. Many of you would be tempted, but we're talking about being an economic burden on the state. So focus on the question. Don't get distracted by, completing high school, being educated. We're talking about being an economic burden on the state. So no, even though it's tempting. Same thing here. We're not talking about how well they do in kindergarten. C, part of the high cost of universal preschool stems from its requirement that preschool teachers must have. We don't care where the costs come from. We care that there are costs on the government, not on the teachers anyway. The taxes necessary to fund can come from a variety of sources, including property taxes. Okay, but that's where the taxes are coming from. We're still not disproving the actual thing though. Let's quickly check E. Students who attend preschool are less likely to require special education. There you go, perfect. So short term, expensive, gets them preschool, but then long term, we don't need to spend as much on special education, which is so expensive for the government. So it perfectly addresses the actual question, which is about the economic burden on the government. Took me a little while, but got there. Okay, so here is going to be a fun passage that we are going to enjoy. The very concept of forgery is a tricky one. Fine art auction house Christie's defines forgery as the making of something in fraudulent imitation of something else. Fair enough. Whether mimicry of another artist's style or outright copying of another artist's work. Christie's defines a fake as any work of art deliberately made or altered to pretend to be something older or better than it is, while a copy is an imitation of an original that does not pretend to be the original. So one's a fake, one's a copy. Replicas and facsimiles are also legitimate copies, but typically differ in scale from the original piece. Okay. A facsimile is a close reproduction, while a replica is an exact reproduction. I didn't know that. Okay, so replica exact, facsimile just close. Yet many of the great masters employed teams of apprentices to finish their masterpieces, with much of the detail work carried out by relative novices. Didn't know that. Who should properly receive credit for such a piece of work? A number of the world's greatest forgers earn their mendacious, their lying appellation unwittingly. The 19th century Italian sculptor Bastiani is generally considered the original master forger. He worked in a style not of his own era. Others took his work and successfully passed it off as the art of various Renaissance-era old masters. Bastiani made no inquiry into how his art was being marketed by the dealer, Freppa. By Christie's definitions, he would likely be considered a faker rather than a forger, as he never sat down with a book of works by Donatello or Michelangelo and tried to create a copy of an existing piece. So that would be a forgery if you copy an existing piece, whereas a faker is just passing off as better than it is. Today, no one would attribute Bastiani's work to the great 14th and 15th century masters. He sculpted an idealized interpretation of Renaissance art rather than a true imitation, a difference that became more obvious with the passage of time, so he wasn't that close to the originals, and the dissipation of contemporaneous opinions about what Renaissance art should reflect. And the dissipation, the disappearance of opinions about what Renaissance art should reflect. So that's another reason where he is not attributed as a master. Like, they didn't fall for it anymore because opinions changed. That was quite hard. The question becomes how to classify his work in the history of sculpture. In truth, and this is the author stepping in now with the opinion, there are few reasonable excuses, notwithstanding critical elitism and the nebulous cult of the artist, to reject good forgeries as good art. This is really important. So the author is saying there are few reasons or excuses to reject forgeries as good art. So the author thinks forgeries should be considered as good art. The classifications need not be mutually exclusive, as in you can be a forger and still be a good artist. It is indisputable that the forgery or fake exists as the tangible creation of some artist, true. Whether it is of greater or lesser merit may be debated by critics and aficionados. All that remains to discuss is whether there is a valid reason to accept a given forgery or fake as good art. Is it good art or not? It is not inconceivable to imagine that some forgeries may garner sufficient acclaim, praise, as to alter the perception, the very classification of the forger himself. Like, he's so good, why even call him a forger? At the Hermitage Museum, one of his sculptures, rests not far from those of the masters whom he stands accused of imitating. Wow, so he's regarded in his own right now. Obviously took a lot of time there, but we can get through it. Which of the following best reflects the author's purpose in writing the passage? It can be difficult to determine who should receive credit for a piece of artwork. Not really, it's the artist. I mean, that was one point mentioned in the middle, but that wasn't the whole purpose. For the purpose questions, we want a broad, vague answer. A forgery can be considered a good work of art in its own right. That's definitely true. C is also true. He should be classified as an artist, but not really. It's not saying he wasn't a forger. He kind of also could be a forger at the same time. It is worse to forge than it's to fake. No, that's a false comparison. That's often an incorrect answer. It can be difficult to distinguish. I think if there's one thing the author wanted us to feel by the end, it was that a forgery can also be considered a good work of art. That there isn't as much of a definition difference between them as we might think. E, it can be difficult to distinguish between forgeries and originals. That wasn't the thrust. We can now tell, since the 19th century, we can now tell the difference. It is worse, that's too subjective. So I don't have time to fully explain my answer, that's what I pick. Which of the following does the claim that forgers earned their mendacious appellation unwittingly? Their lying nickname. This came up in my vocab list, unwittingly. Forgers are wise to avoid asking questions about the sales of their works, so they can plead ignorance. No, unwittingly means unintentionally, whereas A is kind of saying they were doing it on purpose. Unwittingly means unintentionally. Many forgers pretend not to be aware of the fact. That's again pretending. Also the word many, watch out for it, it's quite a weak word. Some forgers were oblivious to the fact that the art they would create was considered forgery. I like that because unwittingly means they didn't know, and that's what the word oblivious means. They didn't know that they were lying, that they were creating forgeries. So I like this, even though the word some is usually weak. A work of art is only a forgery if the maker intended to produce a forgery. Many forgers were not adequately warned about the legal definition. No, we're not really talking about legal. I just like that. Some forgers were oblivious because that fits with the unwittingly. And a forger is the mendacious appellation, the lying nickname, forger. Okay, I'm going to go for that, again, based on time reasons. The passage suggests that which of the following with respect to the term mutually exclusive in the third paragraph? It means you can be a good forgery and also a good work of art. Here we go. It can be appropriate to classify works simultaneously as good art and a good forgery. You might say, why not A then? It's because it's too strict, too extreme. It's saying good forgeries are by definition good works of art. Whereas C is lighter, more vague. Be careful. It says it can be appropriate. And that's a much better answer than A, which is they definitely are good works of art. It's too strong. Don't really have time to look at the others. According to the passage, which of the following is true about him? Notice how I'm not really looking back too much. Some of his forgeries are of such good quality that they continue to cause confusion. No, they weren't confused anymore. As a result of superior education, critics today would not... It's not just superior education, it was also the changing of opinions, wasn't it? And with the passage of time. No, he wasn't aware that he was being passed off. Works reveal E is too subjective, should be classified as an artist. The work reveals prejudice regarding what he and his peers believed art should demonstrate. Yeah, it was something, something here, wasn't it? He sculpted an idealized interpretation of art. So this one I do have to look back, rather than a true imitation. A difference that became more obvious with the passage of time. And the changing or the dissipation of opinions about what art should reflect. So his work reveals prejudices regarding what he and his peers, contemporaneous means peers, like happening at that time, believed art from the Renaissance era should demonstrate. I think it's that. It's not C. E is too subjective because of the word should. I don't think it's B. It's not just superior education. It's also the changing of opinions. A, such good quality continues to cause confusion. No, today no one would attribute his work. So I can eliminate a lot of the others. I think it's D. Let's move on. The something nature of the room was considered extraordinary by everyone. Even Tamika, who realized she was cleaning her own apartment at increasingly irregular intervals. Well, if you clean your apartment at really infrequent, irregular intervals, it's going to be a mess, isn't it? It's going to be squalid and sullied. Obviously, you need to know your vocab for that. Just quickly check. No. Okay. The proposed measure to something the management team's plans to move the company. Right, let me focus on this. This is complicated. The proposed measure to something the management team's plans to move the company. What were the plans? To move the company toward a more environmentally conscious posture. Okay, good plan. Is likely to be rejected by the board. So are we going to support this plan or are we going to attack this plan? Either way, what we do is rejected by the board. Ever since Rodriguez assumed the role of board president last year, the board has demonstrated a particular bent or inclination for progressive action. Okay, so the board wants to be environmentally friendly. And the plan, the management team's plan, was to be more environmentally friendly. So presumably the measure was to stop, to scotch, to foil. The measure to foil or stop the plan to be environmentally conscious, to be green, was rejected by the board because they are pro-environment. This was a lot more about understanding the flow of the sentence rather than vocab, although you had to know your vocab as well. It was just that the board was environmentally friendly. I don't have time to explain, actually. I've just realized. And therefore, they are going to stop the measure to scotch being pro-environment. Okay, I have to come back to that one maybe to explain it. Critics doubt the veracity of recent reports that Corian's publisher has plans to edit and re-release her debut novel. So critics think that's not true. One of the most influential works of its kind. Critics regard the original work with such unusual reverence and praise that such an act would be deemed heresy, probably deemed awful, deemed blasphemous, deemed profane, like heresy, like something you should never do, sacrilegious by most of the community. Under any normal circumstance, a something disposition would be considered condemnable, like something really bad. There are occasions, however, when aggressive action represents the only acceptable alternative. So we're looking for a word meaning aggressive to fit with aggressive here, which is truculent and bellicose, covered in my vocab videos. Local authorities are considering an amendment to the litter law that would raise the fine for littering in the community picnic area to $1,000. That's a lot. Advocates say that raising the fine will make people take notice of the law. Definitely true. They may be correct that higher fines get more attention. Since the inception of the litter law, incremental increases in the littering fine have proven to be consistently effective at further reducing the amount of litter in the community picnic area. Nice. However, raising the fine to $1,000 would actually have the unintended effect of increasing the amount of litter in the picnic area. Picnic area users would perceive this fine to be unreasonable, probably true, and unenforceable, and would disregard the litter law altogether. Select the sentence by clicking on the passage itself that provides support for the author's position. So the author's position is this one. That's the author's conclusion. Raising the fine would have this unintended effect. And so the sentence that supports that is explaining why it has that unintended effect of increasing the amount of litter, which is this one. Because people perceive it to be unreasonable, that's why I'm right about my conclusion that it's actually going to increase the amount of litter. So this sentence is the one that supports the author's position. The most common metal in the Earth's crust, aluminium, was not discovered until 1825 because its isolated state is so reactive that free nuggets or flakes are never found in nature. Moreover, elemental aluminium is extremely difficult and expensive to separate from its ores by traditional chemical means. Interesting. Indeed, the extreme reactivity of aluminium helps protect its modern, ubiquitous manifestations such as aluminium foil. The surface of pure aluminium instantly combines with atmospheric oxygen to form a thin but robust passivization seal of oxide that prevents further corrosion. Interesting. That's why we use it maybe for cans and stuff. Many other metals, such as iron, are less reactive than aluminium, but their superficial oxides do not form as swiftly, completely, or impermeably. Interesting. For several decades after its discovery, aluminium was considered a precious metal, not because of any fundamental scarcity, but because of its cost of production. The price of aluminium suddenly plummeted in 1886, however, when two inventors independently developed a process of separating aluminium from aluminium salts. According to the passage, the natural passivization layer, don't know how to pronounce that, on the surface of aluminium metal forms really quickly. Maybe D, lowers the utility, definitely not, it's helpful, it's less impenetrable. No, we're not talking about how impenetrable it is. Causes atmospheric oxygen to react chemically. Yeah, instantly combines with atmospheric oxygen. That is true. Both of these are true though. Precludes the inexpensive, no. It does, the surface of pure aluminium. Is it the layer? Are they talking about the seal when they talk about the passivization layer? It does provide aluminium with a chemical advantage. That's tough. It's both of those. I'm not sure which one, to be honest, and I don't really have time to check, unfortunately. In terms of economic impact, which of the following hypothetical situations would be most analogous? So the cost dropped because they invented a cheapening process. No, 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 no. Yes, we artificially create diamonds just like we artificially create aluminium, and it was expensive before, but now it's going to be perfected and cheaper. Okay, obviously don't really have too much time to explain these. The author is primarily concerned with showing the utility of aluminium, that's my prediction, and how it became cheap. Economic significance, that's not the main focus. Contrasting, that was the first paragraph, but not really the second paragraph, this one, so not B. Outlining historical and scientific, yes, because this covers both, so it's a broader answer, which is why I like it. The first paragraph was about the scientific characteristics, second about historical, so I like that one. Okay, 1 minute 50 to do this. Surveys reveal that the vast majority of hotel guests in the US resent the high prices of the items in the minibar. These guests would prefer to have an empty refrigerator in their rooms in order to have space to put their own food and beverages, although a large percentage of these guests would still make at least one purchase. A bit hypocritical. After analysing the results of the study, the management of Hotel T decided that it would be more profitable to eliminate the minibar and install empty refrigerators. Interesting. So that's a trade-off between that's what the guests want, but then they were making purchases before, which would support the plan to increase profitability by eliminating. So we want one of these answers to say, yes, this will be profitable. My prediction is that we'll get more revenue from more guests coming because they like the empty refrigerators versus the profit we lost from selling the items in the minibar. That's a good point. They have to be. This did talk about the US, and we don't even know that Hotel T is in the US. It wasn't my prediction at all, but well, we know they have minibar, so it can't be A. Not C, the word sum is weak. The money that makes from the minibar purchases is less than the money hotel loses from discarding. Oh, that's interesting. So we're actually losing money from the minibar. So D really supports it. B is also good though. Oh, that's tough. I'd go for D, obviously because I don't have time, but it looks good, D. And there we go. So my summary from that would be, it was very fun, very enjoyable. Obviously, I probably spent a little bit too long explaining stuff because I had to rush a couple of the questions. I would guess that maybe I got 1 or 2 wrong, but I could have got 0 wrong. Depends a little bit on that asperity question or that very last question, because multiple of the answers look good to me. Obviously, at the end of this video, we're going to look at the ones I got wrong and briefly look maybe at the ones I got right, but I had to struggle a little bit. I hope that was helpful for you, by the way, looking at how I did. And notice how I always engaged with the text, predicted an answer, even under time pressure. So without further ado, let's just check I've got my OneNote ready. There it is. Let's see what we can do with this quant section. Quant, 20 questions, 35 minutes. Let's go. The average arithmetic mean of those, okay, pick numbers 100%. So I'm going to pick 2 and 1. So this adds up to 6, 7, 8. So that's 8. 8 divided by 5. I can do that in my head. That's 1.6 is the average. This one, that's 4 plus 1 is 5. 5 divided by 3 is 1.666. Whereas this was 1.6, so B is bigger. How did I get that? Picking numbers, one of the best skills you can learn for the GRE. This one, A to the X equals B to the X. We don't know if A or B is bigger. For example, imagine X is 1. Actually, wait, no. Imagine X is 0. Even if A was a billion and B was minus a billion, anything to the power of 0 is always 1. So both quantities would be equal here, even though A and B are very different. So we don't know about A and B because we don't know about X. It said A and B aren't 0, but it never said that X wasn't 0. So that's that one. Okay, this one. Let's try to solve these. I'm going to need my little sheet here. Solving the first one, I'd move it all onto the right. And so we had x squared minus 4x, if you bring it to the right, minus 12 equals 0. And the bottom one, actually, let's just quickly solve that first. Two numbers that times to get minus 12, that would be minus 6, x minus 6, x plus 2. So the two solutions for x are 6 and minus 2. Okay, that's the two solutions for x. Oops. Okay, the y one, let's bring it all to the left this time. So y squared minus 4y, if you bring the 2y across by adding 2y to both sides, minus 12. Oh, it's the same one. Ah, it's the same one. So y is also going to be 6 or minus 2. Meaning we don't know which one's bigger, because x could be 6 and y minus 2, or x could be minus 2 and y 6. So we don't know which one's bigger. They both had the same solutions. Okay, quantity A is that, let's do a new section here to give myself some space. 0.25 is a quarter. A quarter to the power of -3. Well, the minus flips it, so it becomes 4 to the power of 3, which is 64. And you should know that off by heart, by the way. The 1/2 to the -6, the minus in the power of the 2 flips it. So this is 2 to the power of 6. It's now on the top line, over 1 you could say, but that doesn't make any difference. It flips it because of the minus here. Power of 6, 2 to the power of 6, luckily I've memorized that. I told all you guys to memorize that in my exponents video. It's also 64, so both quantities are equal. Saves a lot of time to have memorized these things. The line that is graphed on the rectangular coordinate axes, M or B over C. How do you calculate the gradient? You calculate the gradient by doing y2 minus y1. Just quickly, I think I've got time to write out the formula here, even though I'd never do this in the test, obviously. This is the formula I'm using to calculate a gradient. Talked about this in my coordinate geometry video. So the y2, doesn't matter which one I pick, I'm going to pick the top one to be my 2. So that's 0 minus y1, which was minus b. Yes, the double negative is going to cancel, I will remember that. x2, that's the c, minus x1, which is 0. So the minus minus b becomes b, and the c minus 0 is c, so the gradient is b over c. And so both quantities are equal. Because m, by the way, represents the gradient. That's always the number next to the x on its own. In the form y equals mx plus b normally, that is the gradient, the m. Okay, it's going well. This one, let us times it out and find out what is going on. And we have 12xy minus 36y plus 18yz plus 3. And on the right we have minus 36y, these are looking pretty similar, plus 12y, oh that's different, no sorry, plus 12xy, my bad, I think it is going to be the same, plus 18yz. So they're absolutely the same, except quantity A has a plus 3. So quantity A must be bigger. That was fun. The ratio of the measure of angle Q. Okay, so we can quickly solve that because the angles in a triangle add up to what? Can you tell me? Add up to 180. So 4x plus 10 plus the 20 degrees in the bottom left plus the x in the bottom right. All of those angles are going to add up to 180 because the angles in a triangle always add up to 180. This is 5x plus 30 equals 180. And of course we would take away 30 from both sides. So 5x equals 150. And so x is 30. And now I can actually answer the question. If x is 30, then angle Q is 4 times 30 is 90 is 100. Angle R is 30. Wait, what was x again? 30, yeah. So angle Q, wait, no, what am I talking about? 4 times 30 is 120. 120 plus 10 is 130. So it's 130 to 30 is the ratio. Now, I can do that in my head. Obviously, I recommend you guys use a calculator, but that's going to be 4.33. That's the ratio when you divide those numbers. When they ask for a ratio, by the way, they mean divide the numbers usually. That's 4.33, so quantity B is bigger. Obviously, I recommend you guys use a calculator, but almost made a mistake there, but recovered. This one, n to the power of 5 minus n cubed is less than 0. Okay, so we can't actually simplify that too much. I mean, some of you are thinking we could divide by n squared, but that's kind of a fancy technique. We don't need to do that. What we can do is instead just move it across. And so n to the 5 is less than n cubed. It just looks nicer that way. Rather than having the minus, we add n cubed to both sides, and n to the 5 is less than n cubed. And this is the classic perfect question for my golden set of numbers. People think, oh, let's test out integers. And then some people think, oh yeah, maybe let's test out negative numbers as well, like -1. But actually, you want to test out 4 types of numbers for questions like these. A positive integer, like 2. A positive fraction, like a half. A negative fraction, like -1/2. And a negative integer, like -2. Each of those will behave differently when they're raised to different powers. So let's check first a positive integer like 2. 2 to the 5 is not less than 2 to the 3. So it's not 2. A half. A half to the 5 is 1/32. And 1/32 is less than 1/8, which is a half cubed. 1/32 is less than 1/8, so it does work for a half. And many people would stop there and think, I found it, it's a half. So therefore quantity A is bigger because a half is bigger than a half squared. But we've got to keep checking the other numbers. -1/2. -1/2 to the power of 5 is, because it's an odd power, it will keep the negative, -1/32. And -1/2 cubed is -1/8. Now, is -1/32 less than -1/8? No, because it's a smaller fraction, 1/32. That means it's closer to 0, so it's more positive. It's close, but no cigar. It's not -1/2. Quickly, -2 though. -2 to the 5, -32. That is less than -8. So it could be a negative integer such as -2. And if it's -2, then quantity B is bigger because -2 squared is 4, whereas -2 is a negative number. So with a half, quantity A was bigger because a half is bigger than a quarter. But with -2, quantity B is bigger. So it's actually D. And that's a perfect demonstration of how to use the golden set of numbers. So you might want to rewatch that bit. I've got to move on, obviously. This one, which of the following must be true? So that looks like an inequality that I can simplify. So I would, what can we do? Maybe move the b's to one side. So we have A is greater than A plus 2b, because I added 2b. Sorry, I added b to both sides. I could take away A actually, and the A's cancel out. So I have 0 is greater than 2b. Or writing it the other way around, 2b is less than 0. Now, I don't know if you realize we could do that, but you can always try your best to simplify inequalities before you start thinking about it. In fact, we can do even more. We can divide by 2. So b is less than 0. Now, some people would say to me, oh, but what about the original? Like, we've got to keep the original and think about the a's. No. That original simplifies to b is less than 0. So we know for sure that b is less than 0. And that's the only thing we know. We can forget about a's now. The only thing we know is that b is less than 0, meaning that this is true. We don't know about a, and we don't even know this one because even though b is negative, we don't know if a is positive or negative. So a great example of simplifying inequalities where you can. If a and b are positive even integers, which of the following must be odd? Well, I would probably pick numbers here, but they look so simple we can almost do it in our heads. An even times an even is not going to be odd. An even times 3 is still going to be even. If you have one even element, the whole thing becomes even. The only way to end up with an odd is by everything being odd in a product. Now C, an even plus 1. Yeah, because an even plus an even will always be even, right? Like 2 plus 6, 4 plus 2. In fact, you only need one example really. I don't know why I'm doing multiple examples. An even plus an even is always even. And then if we add 1, it's going to be odd. So this has to be odd. Obviously at this point I would probably slow down because I'm like way ahead on time, but I will keep going because Might as well teach you more quicker. Jennifer has 400. Okay, so this is going to be an equation question, so I'm definitely going to need a new page here. And let's do this one. Jennifer has 400 more than Brian has. How do we translate that? J has equals 400 more than, so plus B. If she were to give Brian 20% of her money, then Brian would have 2/3 of the amount of money that Jennifer would then have. This is a bit complicated, but if you give away 20% of your money, how much money are you left with? You're left with 80% of your money. So on the left, I'm going to write what Jennifer has, which is 0.8J, because she's given away 20%. And then it says Brian. Now Brian is B plus the money he just got from Jennifer. Notice how I'm doing it step by step. I'm not doing the 2/3 bit yet. I'm just laying out, okay, Jennifer has 0.8J, Brian has B plus 0.2J. Now we can link them. They say if this happened, then Brian would have, the would have is an equals, 2/3 of the amount of money that Jennifer would then have. Brian would have 2/3 of the amount of money that, so you can almost think of it as what Brian's got, B plus 0.2J, he would have, that's the equals, the would have is the equals, 2/3 of means times what Jennifer's got. So I rewrote it just to demonstrate where the 2/3 goes, because we're translating that sentence directly. Brian, that's what he's got, we wrote it out. Would have, that's an equals, 2/3 of, 2/3 times what Jennifer's got. Now, that was the hard bit, setting up the equation. Now we need to work out B. How much money does Brian currently have? So we need to solve these. Probably the easiest way is just to sub in the J. Yeah, why not? Okay, so let's give ourselves some more space. Sub in the J, we know J is 400 plus B. So the 0.2 I'm going to change to a fifth. And just because fractions are easier than decimals, to be honest, equals 2/3. And the 0.8, you can probably guess, I'm going to change to a 4/5. Now this is the bit you guys are going to love and go wild. I'm going to actually times everything by 15. Why? Because I don't like that I've got this 5 in the denominator here, and I don't like that I've got this 3 in the denominator here. So what's a number I can multiply everything by to get rid of all of those denominators? 15. So times everything by 15, and we get 15b. The 5 cancels out with a 15, and we're just left with 3. So we have 3 times 400b. Notice all the fractions just disappearing in one go. 2/3, when you multiply it by 15, the 15 cancels with the 3 to get 5. 5 times 2 is 10. And obviously you'll notice that that's going to cancel out with the 4/5 as well. So 3 times 400 is 1200b. And this is, oh, it's 400 plus b. Ooh, I almost made a mistake there. You guys probably were screaming at me. It's 400 plus b, so that's 1200 plus 3b. I was wondering why it's 1200b plus 15b. Okay, it's probably because I'm running out of space using this. But anyway, 10 and the 5 cancel out to get 2. 2 times 4 is 8. 8j. Oh, but j I'm going to substitute again as being 400 plus b. This is a hard question. Wow, a lot of effort. Okay, let's do it up here. So the 15b plus 3b is 18b plus 1200. And on the right, we have 3200b plus, oops, let's go back. How is that? Oh, I lost it. 1 second, let's pause the test. To be honest, I think I've deleted it, so I'm gonna have to do it from memory. It was, wasn't it like 18, what was it? 18b plus 1200, test of my memory, equals 3200 plus 8b, I think, because the 10 cancelled out with the 5 to get 2 times 4. I think it was that. That was really bad. Anyway, take away 8b, so that's 10b. If it was this, take away 1200 from both sides is 2000. So b is 200. Okay, if I get that wrong, I'm going to blame it entirely on OneNote, because you guys saw how I totally had that. And then OneNote just deleted my slide, which is really annoying. But anyway, Brian currently has 200, because that's the B. We don't have to exchange the money because it said before the exchange of money. Really tough question though, I will totally admit. Definitely a 170 level. In a certain book club, the members are voting between 2 books, a mystery novel and a biography, to decide which book the group will read next. Okay, there are 3 times as many votes for the mystery novel as there were votes for the biography. The ratio of biography votes to the total number of votes is, well, we could just pick numbers. So if there were 3 votes for mystery and 1 vote for biography, then the ratio of biography votes, which is 1, to the total number of votes, which is 4, is 1 to 4. Picking numbers helps to illustrate that. Much easier than the last question. Which of the following equations defines a line for which no points on the line lie in quadrant 3? Well, if we're not going to lie in quadrant 3, then we want a line that has a negative slope but a positive y-intercept, because then it will go down from the top left, cut through the y-axis somewhere positive, and keep going down to the bottom right and never touch quadrant 3. So I'm looking out for a line with a negative slope but with a positive y-intercept. That's the first one. Negative slope, positive y-intercept. B doesn't have it, C doesn't have it, and nor do D and E. So it's A. You could test it out by drawing it out, but that's my answer. Okay, this one. National debt as a percentage of GDP. Okay, national debt, all the different levels. Countries, all of that. GDP per capita, okay. What approximately was Italy's total population in millions in 2006? Italy, we know their GDP is 1.8 billion, 1,845 billion, and their GDP per capita is that. So couldn't we do the total GDP divided by the amount of money per person to find the number of people? Except how am I going to do that, because that's such a big number. If I divide both of them by 1,000, then I can fit it in the calculator, because then it's like 1,845 million divided by that. Okay, let's see if I can do this on, let's use my calculator. I know it's a kind of crappy one, but it replicates how bad the real one is. So, where is it? 1,000. So I've divided both of them by 1,000. Just to make the calculation fit on the screen. That's the most number of digits these calculators can take. So we've got 1,845 million, because it used to be billion, but I divided by 1,000. And now I'm going to divide that not by 31,000, but by 31.49, because I've divided it by 1,000. It's just a good way of fitting things onto the calculator screen. If the calculation you're doing is too big, just divide both sides by something in a division, for example, and then you can fit it onto the calculator. So there were 58 million people in Italy. Okay, I'm sure there might have been an easier way of doing that, but that's how I did it. Okay, next one. What approximately was China's national debt per capita in 2006? National debt per capita. Wow, so we need to work out the national debt, then work out the number of people, and then once we've worked out the national debt and the number of people, we divide it to find the national debt per capita. So national debt, China was about, what was that, 18%? 18% of their GDP, which is 2668. So again, bring out the calculator. So 2668 billion, I know this is, times 18%, so this answer is in billions. So their debt was 480 billion. So I'm going to write that down. 480 billion. And how many people are there? Well, again, we divide it. So we're going to divide the GDP, which is 2668 billion, by the GDP per capita to find the population. And again, I'm going to divide both of them by... Actually, you know what? If I just divide them direct, that gives me the answer in billions. So I know this first figure is in billions, so it's 2668 billion. But if I divide by 2034, then the answer is 1.3 billion people, because this is still in billions. So that's how many people in China, 1.3 billion. So the debt per person, we worked out there was 480 billion in debt. 480 billion in debt divided by 1.3 billion people is $369, or 374 is close enough. I think I got that right. Obviously in the real test I would check a bit more, but just use the graph to find the debt, divided these two figures to find the number of people, because per capita means per person, and then divided those two figures to find the debt per person. So yeah, that's what I would pick. 10 minutes left, that should be fine. There's another one on this graph. Here we go. How many of the countries shown had smaller debt total than Canada did? So how much debt did Canada have? GDP 1251 billion, and the percent was 60 something percent. Now, is this a quicker way? In fact, we know all these countries down here had a smaller debt, right? Because Spain, Brazil, they all had a smaller percentage and their GDPs were smaller. So if they had a smaller percentage of debt relative to their GDP and their GDPs were smaller, they definitely had less debt. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 countries less. But then you've got the UK and China and the US that had a smaller percentage. But it's a smaller percentage of a much bigger amount. In fact, we worked out last time that China had 480 billion in debt, didn't we? So let's quickly check if that's the same as Canada. Canada, 1251 billion is their GDP. Just going to quickly compare it to China, and the percent was 64, so. And I know I should use the keyboard, 800. So China did have less debt, because look, the percentage was so much lower that even though they had like double the GDP, it still had less debt, China did. So that's country number 8. So there's 8 countries at least. Now, I don't really have time to check the UK. I mean, definitely not the US, even though it's slightly smaller, their GDP is so much bigger. But the UK, I mean, I guess I could check it, probably should check it. So Canada was 800 billion, wasn't it? The UK, 2345. And our percentage is about 45%. So we had more. So it was just the 8 countries that had smaller debts. Haven't missed any? No, just China was the extra one. These are hard questions, actually. Manhattan is obviously known for quite hard questions, but there we go. In the lines above, M and N are straight, and the various angles have measures as shown. If x plus y is 80, I'm definitely going to need my one note here. Let's do a new page. What's the question? If x plus y is 80, so x plus y equals 80. So we're going to have to just form as many equations as we can. Wait, if you see that line n going from the top left down to the bottom right, all the angles to the right of that, the y, and x, they must add up to 180 because it's a straight line. So I know 3y plus x equals 180 because it's a straight line. And if x plus y is 80, then the 2y, the extra 2y that we've got equals the 100. That's the gap between 80 and 180. So y is 50. Basically, I subtracted the equations using the elimination method. So y is 50. If y is 50, then x is 30. And what's the question? What's z minus y? Wait, isn't this missing angle on the left, the one that's not labeled, that's the same as x, isn't it? Because it's an opposite angle. So that's also 30. So we can add up all the angles we've got so far. Then there's an x on the left and x on the right. And then all the angles in a circle add up to 360. So we can work out z. There may be another way of doing this, probably. In fact, actually there is, isn't there? Z is just opposite to those three y's. So if you notice, those three y's are perfectly opposite the z. And so the three y's must equal the z. And what was y again? Y was 50, so z is 150. So 150 minus the 50 is 100. Now, in the real test, I'd probably check that using the 360 method that I was about to use, but here, let's move on. Joe needs to paint all the airplane hangars at the airport, so he buys this much paint to do the job. During the first week, he uses a quarter. During the second week, he uses a fifth of the remaining. So he used a quarter of all the paint, that's 90, right? Leaving him 250. And then he used a fifth of the remaining, so a fifth of 250, which is 50. So he used 90 and then 50, so he used 140. Obviously saves a bit of time to do some mental maths there, if you're confident with it. Jim's dog, Tucker, eats every hour on the hour when the time on the clock reads an exact hour, and eats exactly half of the number of dog food pellets in his bowl. Okay. If Jim fills Tucker's bowl at 7:30 a.m. with 80 dog food pellets, what percentage of the original 80 pellets will there be at 11:30? Well, that's an annoying question because it's like, oh no, it's 11:30. Okay, sorry, it's on the exact hour. So at 8 a.m. it drops down to 40. At 9 a.m. it drops down to 20. 10 a.m. it drops down to 10. And at 11 a.m. it drops down to 5. Now, at 11:30 it'll be the same because he hasn't changed anything by 11:30. So it'll be 5. So it's 5 out of 80. Let's quickly use this calculator for fun. 5 out of 80 is the percent that's left over. 6.25%. Yes, happy with that. Okay, last one. In the figure above, if the line segment BC and CD have equal lengths, so it's an isosceles right angle triangle, so it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and angle ABC is 105, what is the value of x? Well, we got it already. If BC and CD are equal in length, it's isosceles, so it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle, meaning the angle CBD is 45 and CDB is also 45. And if CBD is 45 and the entire angle at B, ABC, is 105, take 45 away from 105 and that leaves 60 left over for x, so x is 60. Okay, that was ending on quite an easier one, but that is a whole quant section done. Obviously in the real test we would definitely go back and check our answers, but for the purposes of this video I wanted to just move on essentially. So I hope that section showed you how I do quant. take my time on some questions, other questions go quite quickly. Again, as in for the entire rest of the video, if any of this is helpful, do let me know with a like or a comment to let me know, and then we're going to move on. Okay, and now let's move on to the next section, which is another verbal, of course, and let's get started. Okay, it is interesting that a number of experts on techniques that purport to promote inner peace, that on the surface seem to promote inner peace, do not display a particularly high level of inner peace, I'm guessing is coming, when confronted with evidence of the lack of effectiveness. Do not display a particularly high level of inner peace. Equanimity, peacefulness, calmness, composure. Those assembled were beyond impressed by how well the young man spoke, and would have listened to him pleasantly digress, talk about other things, for hours, had the event not been something by the host's sudden illness. Curtailed, abridged, shortened. Attenuated means weakened, that doesn't fit. Abridged, edited, shortened by the illness. Protracted means made longer. They were impressed by how well the young man spoke. Now, extempore, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think that means without notes. That's a hard word. Eulogistically is like in mourning, like a eulogy. But it's talking about him pleasantly digressing. It's not a funeral. Reticently means shyly. It doesn't fit. I'm going to go with these two. This is some advanced vocab right here. The startling, meaning surprising, findings that variations in the rate of the Earth's rotation depend to a something degree on the weather. Surprising finding that the variations depend to a unexpected degree, because it's surprising, right? Startling on the weather has caused a complete something of the world's timekeeping methods. Overhaul? It was my guess. Yeah, a complete upheaval, a big change. Some anti-gentrification activists against like the fancification of a neighborhood view the recent passing of this person, designer, of the something and iconic Greek-inspired coffee cup. I'm going to go for ubiquitous because it's everywhere. Design seen throughout New York, it's everywhere. Ubiquitous. As a something of a new era. A portent, something maybe, like a forewarning of a new era. As neighborhoods become more affluent, activists say the cup will likely continue to disappear as rapidly as affordable housing will. As a portent. So portent is a bit like an omen. It might be a bad thing coming. And they're talking about the disappearing of affordable housing. So I think we need like a slightly negative word there, like portent. Okay. Ideally, the rules of order of the town meeting would have helped to rein in the something discussions. Could be tangential, off topic, or politic to do with, no, I think tangential. Can't be relevant because we need to rein in these discussions. That deviated from the established meeting, yeah, tangential, going off on a tangent, a bit like an angle. Having been cobbled together over many years and several changes in leadership, the rules, instead of providing something governing principles, cohesive, keeping things together, the other two words wouldn't fit at all, and keeping the meeting on point, actually contain some contradictory information, these rules, thus obfuscating, confusing, blocking, obscuring the expected method of discourse at meetings. Yeah, they wouldn't be helping, elucidating, or inveighing against something. No, happy with that? Obviously, I'm spending a bit less time explaining it because I almost ran out of time last time. If we consider religions to be necessarily something, then Buddhism would clearly not count as a religion. If, however, the term religion is used to include any set of teachings that address concerns, then Buddhism certainly qualifies. For while the whole point of its teachings is to... Notice how I can't answer already. I have to keep reading because I'm not sure, it could be many things. For while the whole point of its teachings is to permanently eliminate any and all suffering. Eliminate any and all suffering, so salvational, like saving you from suffering. Buddhism, something denies an eternal, all-powerful and all-perfect creator. So I think the first one's going to be theistic, meaning godlike or all-powerful. Because if we consider religions to be theistic, like having a god, theo, then Buddhism is not a religion. However, if it's anything salvational, to do with saving people, then it counts because it wants to eliminate suffering. What's the last one then? For while the whole point of its teachings is to permanently eliminate any suffering, Buddhism unequivocally or tacitly denies. I think unequivocally, because it said would clearly not count as religion. Whereas if it was tacitly, which is kind of quietly, then it would be a bit more borderline. But it said clearly not count. So unequivocally is like clearly. Notice there's always a clue in the sentence. Okay, here's a fun passage. Although the first major and systematic defence of women's rights appeared as early as 1792, with this woman's Vindication of the Rights of Woman, it would almost be a century before the theme of women's equality with men was seriously entertained as a result of a man, that's ironic, the subjection of women. This woman argued that women appeared different from men in moral character, largely due to the deficient opportunities afforded them, and the social expectation that they concern themselves with frivolity, silly matters. She emphasized the importance of educating women consistent with their role as educators and caretakers of children, yet fell short of clearly defending a statement of the equality of the sexes. She could have been ahead of the mark. Sometimes seeming to grant a natural superiority to men. In Mill's work, the belief that women are by nature inferior to men, this guy's work, was subjected to a powerful demand for empirical evidence. So he was like, show me the evidence that women are inferior. He didn't believe it, Mill. Echoing this woman, he recognized that women appear inferior due to the differential social constraints acting on the sexes, and insisted that equality must be instituted in practice before women's nature may be clearly seen, enough to allow a fair comparison to men's. He excoriated, attacked harshly, castigated the then popular notion that social inequality was needed to safeguard the natural roles of women as caretakers and childbearers. No law, he noted, is needed to prevent women from doing what they naturally cannot but do. No law is needed to prevent women from doing what they naturally must do, cannot but do. That's an obscure phrase. And if it is indeed in the best interest of society to have women serve as caretakers, such positions must be made appealing enough to be worth holding. I'm not fully sure about the ending, but I think I understand everything here. The passage suggests that the original lady believes greater social equality was needed to help them out as educators and caretakers of children, which is this one, not income, never talked about income. I don't think she believed in having a similar moral character, because she says that she kind of granted a superiority to men. Although it says, echoing her, he recognized that women appear inferior due to the differential social constraints. This is tough. Believed greater social equality was needed to emphasize the importance of educating women. Provide women with opportunities to demonstrate a moral character similar to men. I would normally say no, because she thinks that they're kind of inferior. But then it did say here that she also believed, because he was echoing her, that women appear inferior due to differential social constraints. And it's more him, though, that insisted that equality must be instituted before women's nature may be clearly seen enough to allow a fair comparison. That's tough. Is that something that she believes as well or not? I mean, he was echoing her when he said this first bit, but then he's maybe adding on his own opinion here. So I don't think C. I don't think she wants women to have a moral character or believes they can have a moral character. I think she thinks men are naturally superior. So I'm going to go for A. If it's C, I'll be a little bit annoyed, to be honest. Okay. The original lady argument in the Vindication of the Rights of Women implies that if both sexes were allowed identical opportunities and subjected to the same social expectations, the result would be that definitely not A, definitely not B. There would be greater parity between the respective moral character. Not really. Definitely not E. The frivolity came here, didn't it? Although it's a bit extreme to say women would not at all concern themselves with frivolity. Yes, there's a social expectation that they do, but it's not like if they were given opportunities, women in general, full stop, would not concern themselves. So I don't like D, it's too strong. I think between B and C, and I think B looks better because the influence on society, because they'll be able to educate children more. This is tough. Moral character. Although moral character is mentioned here, they only appear different from men in moral character. So I think actually this one, it's even better than B, because we do talk about helping children, but we don't necessarily talk about the influence on society, which is kind of an assumed thing, whereas C is explicitly talked about. So I like it more. Select by clicking in the passage itself the sentence that provides support for an attack on a view. So there's the attack. He excoriated the notion that social inequality was needed to safeguard the women as caretakers. And where did he support it? Here. No law is needed. That's his attack. Excoriated. It's kind of testing your vocab. Did you know that excoriated was like an attack? And then he supported it by saying all of this. That's my opinion anyway. Okay, another CR question. Items that seemed unremarkable today might once have altered the course of history. For centuries, the nutmeg tree grew only in the Banda Islands. Locals harvested and sold the aromatic nuts of the tree, and eventually a spice was made from these nuts, and it became a luxury item in the European market. Cool. Seeking a monopoly over this valuable spice, the Dutch attacked the Bandas, subjugating the native people in a mostly successful attempt to control the trade. However, one island in the Banda chain remained in the hands of the British, engendering much conflict between Netherlands and England. Finally, the British offered to cede control of the island in exchange for New Amsterdam, a Dutch outpost in North America. The Dutch were more interested in the spice trade than in the small outpost of New Amsterdam. In 1667, the Treaty of this gave the Dutch complete control of the Banda Islands and the nutmeg trade, and gave the British New Amsterdam, promptly renamed New York. So that's how the British got New York. Interesting. Which of the following, if true, most strengthens the claim that New Amsterdam would have remained a Dutch possession if not for the conflict over nutmeg? Strengthens the claim. That's a tough one, hard to predict. If not for the conflict over nutmeg, which of the following most strengthens the claim would have remained? Well, that's hard to say. None of these look good. We want a reason that says the Dutch would have liked New Amsterdam and really wanted to keep it. E's okay, but it's not great. D is pretty good, because if New Amsterdam was really lucrative, then why would the Dutch have given it up? They wouldn't have given it up. They really wanted it because it's lucrative. And so that supports the argument that they would have tried to keep it. So I'm going to go with that one. The others don't really... Although A, attempts to cultivate nutmeg trees outside of the Bandit Islands had failed. No, I'm going to go with D just based on time. Okay. The passage suggests which of the following about the Bandit Islands. We don't know who first did it, so it's not A. We definitely don't know it's the only spice. Did it say that? Talks about the nutmeg tree grew only there. Locals harvested and sold the nuts of the tree. Yeah, it said that directly. We definitely don't know D. And we don't know E. So I'm going to go for C, surely. It just said it directly. A spice made from these nuts. I'm going to go for that. I'd be surprised if that's wrong. The author is primarily interested in not A, because the first paragraph wasn't about New Amsterdam. Yeah, B is a nice and vague, broad answer, so it works well for this kind of question. Although B is also good, the specific example is nutmeg, and that has altered the course of history. I guess the problem with B is it doesn't discuss many items, only one item. So C is better, it's one specific example. Not D, not E. So happy with that. Okay, I'll go a bit quicker here. The vulnerability of communications infrastructure and widespread dependence on the power grid make cyber attacks a particularly dangerous, disruptive, deleterious. Both of those mean bad, dangerous, damaging. Definitely not unobtrusive. Yeah, I'm going to go for that. Yeah, those two. Vocab question, clearly. Rather than attempt to attenuate, weaken the vitriolic, hyperbolic tone of the debate, the hopeless moderator amplified the hostility, made it worse. All of his questions were provocations, clearly aimed at something the candidates, like goading them, piquing them, getting them excited. Not coddling, entrapping. No, drawing out is kind of like piquing. Tempering means moderating. No, I'm going to go drawing out. Piquing, exciting, stimulating them, drawing them out of their shell, getting them to argue. Entrapping is not the same. So no, I'm going to go for those two. Even in retail sales, where a certain degree of something is expected of those interacting with the public, a strong reputation for friendly customer service is rarely achieved. Where a certain degree of friendliness, something that means friendly, cordiality, bonhomie, friendliness, being cordial, bonhomie. Levity is more like laughter and lightness. Let's check this makes sense. Where a certain degree of friendliness is expected of those interacting with the public. A strong reputation for friendly customer service is rarely achieved. Yeah. Question is, which one means friendliness more? I think levity is more laughter, lightness. Cordiality is definitely friendship. Not the other three. Bonhomie, I believe, is what they're testing. I think that also means friendship, being amiable, I believe. I'm only about 90% sure though. Why Bob always seemed to seek out the something for dates was a mystery to all his friends. It seemed obvious to them that the reason was not, as his sister suggested, that he was looking for someone like his first girlfriend, who was rather loquacious, talkative. So why he always seemed to seek out the talkative people? It seemed obvious to them. I always check if that word makes sense. I fill in the blank in my head and then I just reread to check it makes sense. It seemed obvious to them that the reason was not that he was looking for someone like his first girlfriend. Although it said it seemed obvious to them that the reason was not. So maybe it's reticent and taciturn, as in quiet. Why Bob always seemed to seek out quiet people for dates was a mystery. It seemed obvious to them that the reason, it was obvious to those friends that the reason was not that he was looking for someone like his first girlfriend. And it's obvious because she was talkative and he's seeking out reticent people, taciturn people. I think that makes sense. I have no idea what pleonastic or flagitious means, so this is tough. I'll go for that based on timing. Dogs are widely used by the police to detect drugs smuggling and drug caches. Yet recent evidence suggests that insects might be more effective in this capacity. Amazing. In the 1950s, this dude developed the first method that enabled researchers to record activity in insect smelling nerves and to identify the compounds that trigger a behavioral response. Insect smelling nerves, nose nerves, are very similar to those of vertebrates. Insects first detect odors via finger-like protuberances on the antenna, called sensilla. These molecules pass through pores in the outer cuticle, this is complicated, of the sensilla and then attach to a binding protein. Okay, why do we need to know all this? This protein carries the hydrophobic molecules, the molecules that don't like water, through the lymph fluid found inside the cell. So it carries these molecules through the fluid and attaches them to receptors on the dendritic projections of the nerve cell. This is so complicated. I hope we're not testing all of this. Finally, these receptors send signals to the central nervous system, allowing for easy detection by researchers. The position of the organs, smelling organs, on the surface of the body allows for direct investigation of the system's response. So basically, because the smelling organs are right on the surface, I guess the antennas, then it's easy to investigate. So maybe they could be used better than dogs. Uber complicated though. Researchers are able to capture and interpret an insect's response to certain odor because it's on the surface. Don't think it's A. That's not the reason, that's just the end result. B. C. No, that's not the reason, they're just similar. Yeah, perfect. E, just as I predicted, because I read slowly, I understood what was going on. Which of the following most accurately describes the primary purpose? So remember, we're looking for a vague answer that covers both paragraphs. To urge that one animal be used in place of another. No, why not use both? And also an insect isn't an animal, I don't think. To explain the advantages and disadvantages. No, it's all advantages so far. C, to describe a mechanism and indicate how it might be exploited. Yeah, it did describe the mechanism, second paragraph. And in the first paragraph, it indicated how it might be exploited or used. So we have a vague answer that covers both paragraphs. I'm liking it. D, no, that's only the second paragraph. E, not the history, so C. That's quite clear. Which of the following can be inferred? Some police departments have already tested using insects to detect smuggling. Did it say that? No, it never said they're actually used. I don't think. So not A. The use of dogs to detect smuggling dates back to the 19th century. Never says that. It says widely used. Never says that. C. Detection of signals sent by the receptors to the central nervous system is easier in insects than in mammals. It did say it was easy detection, but it never compared them. Remember, wrong answers in the test often take the form as like a comparison that wasn't made in the text. It never compared them. It said it was easy, but didn't say it was easier than for mammals. So, not C, I don't think. In the first half of the 20th century, there was no reliable method. But E looks rubbish. Flying insects and crawling insects. We have no idea about that, right? So it has to be D, unless I've missed something. In the first half of the 20th century, there was no reliable method. Yes, because it said in the 1950s, this guy did the first method. So before that, in the first half, there was no method. If he did the first one, I think it's going to be D. It's way better than the others anyway. And this one, last one. Officials of the Youth Hockey League and parents of players in the league have become concerned with the number of flagrant obvious fouls occurring during league games. This past season, the number of flagrant fouls was double the number from the season before. Okay. League officials plan to reduce the number of such fouls during the coming season by implementing mandatory compulsory suspensions for players who commit flagrant fouls. It seems like it might work. Okay, which of the following statements, if true, provides the best evidence that the plan will be effective? So we want an answer that says this will be effective. It will reduce the number of fouls. A is talking about injuries, but remember, focus on the conclusion. And the conclusion is that we're going to reduce the number of fouls, not necessarily injuries. So we're not really talking about injuries. We're talking about the number of fouls. I don't like A. League referees have been trained to recognise flagrant fouls and to report incidents involving such fouls. That kind of helps, but not really. It's a little bit of a help. Parents of players in the league are in support. That doesn't show that it will be effective. The local adult league suspends players for committing flagrant fouls. This league has a relatively low incidence. That's better, but the slight issue is its argument by analogy. It's saying that because it worked over here, maybe it's going to work here. I don't normally like those kind of arguments. E. Most players in the league strive to be selected for the all-star team, and league rules state that no player with a record of suspension shall be selected. Well, that's really good, because we have firm evidence that the players in the league, most of them in fact, and that's a mathematical word, it means more than half of the players want to do this thing, be all-star. And they cannot, it's a definitive answer, they cannot do that if they're suspended. So this is a real threat of punishment to deprive most players of what they really want. So I think E is much better. I mean, B, C, and D, A is not good at all, I think, but B, C, and D are okay. They do support it, but the one that provides the best evidence, I think, is E, because it's more definitive, it's more clear. It's not using an argument by analogy like D. Parents, I mean, it's so indirect, right? So yes, parents supporting it is going to help, but it's indirect. You're kind of assuming, therefore, that parents have an influence on the kids. Or with B, you're assuming that the training is going to help them better spot it. But E doesn't rely on an assumption. It's telling us direct that the players strive, or most of them even, not some of them, that would have been a weaker answer, most of them strive to be selected, and it's definitive without any assumption that you can't play for All-Star if you have a suspension. So E is much better for those reasons. And there we had it. I probably didn't need to rush as much on the earlier questions, but I did. And you know what? I'm just going to go straight on to Quant because that was quite an enjoyable section. So I don't even need a break here. I'll just check that my thingy is ready. There it is. And we're going to go straight on to Quant because I want to know my results as well. Okay. This one. BC equals 2AB. So that side is double AB. The length of side AB and the length of side AC. Well, if BC is 2AB, I know what they're testing. They're testing that the third side of a triangle can't be longer than the other two sides put together. So that BC, which is already double of AB, it can't be longer than both other sides put together. I've done a video on this, one of my earliest videos. So AC has to be smaller than AB, as in quantity A is bigger. So AC has to be smaller, because if it was bigger, it has to be bigger. Because if it was smaller, if AC was smaller, then AC and AB wouldn't even add up to BC. Because remember, BC is double of AB. And these two sides at the top need to add up to the bottom side, otherwise you can't even form a triangle. So AC is going to have to be bigger than AB, otherwise you can't even form a triangle. That is pretty tough for a first question though. Chandra drove the same route to work each morning, Monday through Friday in a particular week. On Monday and Tuesday she averaged 20 miles per hour, and on 3 remaining work days she averaged 30. Chandra's speed for all 5 morning commutes, 26 miles an hour. Well, couldn't we just... Let's make up a distance, to be honest. Let's make up that the distance is 60. And therefore, it took her 3 hours on Monday and Tuesday, and 2 hours on the other 3 days. So in total, that's 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. That's 6 plus 6, that's 12 hours. And she did 5 days, so 5 times 60. She did 300 miles in 12 hours. 300 divided by 12, I should be able to do it in my head. 150 divided by 6. 50 divided by 2, 25. So our average speed was 25. Wait, that doesn't make sense. 150 divided by... Let me get out my calculator here. Because 25 is exactly halfway. Did I do the maths wrong now? 25, no, that's right. So she took 3 hours on the first. If we make up the distance as 60, that's 3 hours plus 3 hours plus 2 hours plus 2 hours plus 2 hours, 12 hours. And she did 60 miles 5 days, so 300 miles. 300 divided by 12 is 25. Why did I not think it's 25 though? I guess because that's halfway between them. But anyway, the numbers don't lie, it's 25, so quantity B is bigger. I pick numbers just to make my life easier. I'm kind of lazy like that. Okay, in the figure above, the area of the smaller square region is half the area of the larger square region. Okay, well the area of the larger one is 1 times 1 because it's a square, so that's 1. So this inner square has an area of a half. The positive difference in the length between the diagonal of the larger square and the diagonal of the smaller square. I always teach students to remember this fact, and they never do. I've done a video on it, I think called Inscribed Squares or something, but the diagonal of a square is always root 2 times the side length. So see, the side length of the big square is 1 inch, so the diagonal is 1 times root 2, which is root 2. Now, to find we know the area of the inner square is a half. And so the square root of a half, I'm going to need my sheet, not a calculator. The square root of a half is going to be the side length, because you square root the area to find the side length. So that's the side length, which is 1 over root 2. This is the inner square I'm talking about. You have to simplify that, so times top and bottom by root 2. which gets you to root 2 over 2. That's the side length of the inner square. But remember, were you listening? How do we find the diagonal of a square if we know its side length? We times by root 2. So if we times root 2 over 2 by root 2, which is just root 2 over 1, then we get 2 over 2, which is 1. So, in summary, the diagonal of the big square is root 2, and the diagonal of the inner square is 1. So the difference in the length, this I could use a calculator for. So root 2 is that's the big diagonal, take away the inner diagonal, that's the difference. So that's quantity A, 0.414, and let's test quantity B. Divide by 2, 0.7. So quantity B is bigger. That was quite quick, of course, because I wanted to save time, but those are the methods that you need. I've done videos on them. Julius has a piece of string that is 24 inches long. He is stretching the string around pegs on a pegboard to create different shapes. Okay, 24 inches long. The maximum area of a rectangular hexagon caused by the string. One thing you need to know about a hexagon is made up of 6 equilateral triangles, and it's got 6 sides. So each side, therefore, divided by 6 is going to be 4 inches long. And do you know the area of an equilateral triangle? From memory, I did a video on this. It's been a while though. I don't need to work it out though. In fact, I was about to work it out because it's root 3 over 4 times s squared. And I could work out the area of the hexagon. But actually, I don't even need to work any of this out because I've just noticed quantity B, he's only forming a square. And the more sides you have, the greater the area. So if I have a string and I make a hexagon, that's going to be a bigger area than a square. And an octagon is going to have a bigger area than a hexagon because the biggest possible area is actually a circle, which has infinite sides. So I don't even need to work it out. I was about to show off and work it out, but I don't even need to. So quantity A is going to be a bigger area. We'll just save a lot of time there. Triangle ABC is an isosceles triangle with sides of length 4 and 6. But we don't know which side is the isosceles one. It might be 4, 4, 6, or it might be 4, 6, 6. Same thing with this. Might be 4, 4, 6, or might be 6, 6, 4. So we don't know. The area of triangle ABC, the area of triangle that. We don't know, right? Because if it's 4, 4, 6, I mean, they could be the same triangle, 4, 4, 6, both of them. Or it could be, if we make the sides longer, 4, 6, 6. That would presumably make the area bigger. Yeah, it must do. And so we don't know. It could be the same area. It could be a small area, like it could be 4, 4, 6 on the left and 6, 6, 4 on the right. So I think it's D. Pretty happy with that. I'm going to save time. This one. X, Y is positive, so they're both positive or both negative. X is greater than Y. Okay, well, if they're both positive, like 2 and 1, then quantity A is going to be bigger. 2 over 1 is bigger than 1 over 2. But if they're both negative, like X is minus 1 and Y is minus 2, because minus 1 is bigger than minus 2, then A would be a half because the minuses would cancel, and B would be 2 and the minuses would cancel. So we actually don't know because XY being positive means they're both positive or both negative. Trying to catch us out there. John can dig a 10-foot ditch in 4 hours. Kevin can do it in 5 hours. Luke can do it in 6 hours. Oh my God. Michael can do it in 8 hours. The time it takes John and Michael, the time it takes Kevin and Luke. Okay, you guys are going to go wild at this. We're going to use my work rate method that I know you guys love from my video. If you haven't seen it, do check out my video on this topic. So we have John and Michael, so he's the 4 and the 8. So we convert them into rates by doing the reciprocal. If he takes 4 hours, John's rate is 1/4. That's a J, by the way. And Michael, if he takes 8 hours, his rate is 1/8. We add them up to find the combined rate. 1/4 is 2/8, plus 1/8 becomes 3/8. That's the combined rate. And what do we do with the combined rate to find the combined time? We flip it, so it's 8/3. That's how long they take. Same thing for Luke and Kevin. Kevin is 5 hours, so he becomes 1/5. Luke is 6 hours, so he becomes 1/6. Adding them up, that's what, 6 plus 5/30, 11/30. That's the combined rate. And we flip that to find the combined time, 30/11. Now 30/11 is going to be just exactly 3, almost exactly 3, whereas 8/3 is like 2.6. Obviously you can do this in the calculator if you want. So the time it takes Kevin and Luke is slightly more. It's like 2.9 or something. So yeah, I'd go with that one being bigger. Okay, the box pictured on the right is a cube, then the difference in length between BC and AB is what fraction of AC? So straight away it's a cube, so I'm going to call all lengths 1, make up a number to make it easier. I've done a video on this, 3D Pythagoras, but the diagonal between two corners on a 3D shape like that is a squared plus b squared plus c squared equals the diagonal squared. So 1 squared plus 1 squared plus 1 squared equals 3, and then square root of 3, therefore is that BC length, that long diagonal. So BC is 3. AB is just a flat diagonal, like normal Pythagoras. So we do 1 squared plus 1 squared, that's 2, so square root 2 is AB. The difference between them is root 3, which was the long diagonal, minus root 2, which I know is 1.41. That's a good one to memorize. So that's the difference between them. It's a complicated question. The difference between BC and AB, I've worked it out, 0.32, is what fraction of A to C, which is 1 in my example. So about 30%. Okay, I'm not going to check too much because I want to save time, but let's keep going. List S includes those elements and has an average of 7 and a median of 5.5. If X is less than Y, then which of the following is the maximum possible value of X? So straight away, if you tell me the average, what am I going to do? Multiply to find the total. So there are 6 terms. If the average is 7, 6 terms times 7, the total is 42. And so far, 8 plus 2 plus 11 is 21, plus 3 is 24. And I know the total is 42, which leaves 18 left over. So I know that X plus Y is 18. Now, what else do I know? I know that the median is 5.5 and X is less than Y. Let's put the numbers in order, 2, 3, 8, 11, and then we don't know about X and Y. Although it does say the median is 5.5, which is the exact median you get with 3 and 8, because 3 and 8 are in the middle. 3 plus 8 is 11, divided by 2, 5.5. And X is smaller than Y, so X could be anywhere on the left, like 3 or lower, because then it won't affect this median, which is 3 plus 8 over 2, and Y is the bigger one, so it's on the right, so Y could be 8 or more. We know they have to add up to 18. So what's the max that we can do where it adds up to 18? Oh, the maximum possible value of X would be 3, right? Wait, 3, but then Y would be like 15. Y could definitely be, so X could be 3. Just check I've done that right. 8 plus 2 is 10, plus 11 is 21, plus 3, 24. And there's 6 terms with an average of 7. So the total is 42. 42 take away 24 is 18. So x and y do add up to 18. So, I mean, could x be 4 though? If x was 4, the problem is if x is 4, then the median would no longer be 5.5. You'd have to make y 7 to keep the median 5.5, because halfway between 4 and 7 is 5.5. But then we know y can't be 7 because x and y, 4 and 7, don't add up to 18. But if we make x 3, then y could be 15, that's fine, because x will be here 3, y would be all the way over here 15, and the median would still be halfway between 3 and 8, which is 5.5. So it works. And the problem with answer 4 is that you'd have a 4 in the middle, and halfway between 4 and 8 is not 5.5. So I think 3 is the maximum possible value. Cool. Which of the following is equivalent to the following expression? Well, the 3 and 27 would cancel to get a 9. X to the 7 and x to the 2 would cancel to have an x to the 5, and the y would be on the bottom. So it would be a 9, the x to the 5 on the top, but the 9 would be on the bottom. Wait, what? Oh, sorry, this one. Yeah, because the 3 cancels with the 27 to get 9 on the bottom. x7, x2 becomes x5. But that'll be on the top though. No, the x5 will be on the top. What's going on here? And the y will be on the bottom. So confused. Maybe... What is going on? It's none of those. It's none of those. Like this, it's not A, because you'd be left with a 9 at the bottom. If you divide top and bottom by 3, you get a 9, not a 3. But it's not the second one, because if that said x to the minus 5 at the bottom, it would be correct, but not x to the 5. The x to the 5 should be at the top. It's not x to the 6, because x7 divided by x2, you minus it and you get x5. Oh, wait, there's another x here. I didn't see. So with C, there's another x. That's so random, they didn't cancel it out. So x6 and x cancels and you get x5. So it is C. That's so weird. They left the x there to kind of fool me, and they almost did. Kind of annoying. Okay. In the decimal, a bar over a digit indicates that the digits repeats indefinitely, okay? If a and b are integers and that equals that, and a plus b equals 17, oh dear, this looks hard. Which of the following? Wait, so the 6, because there's a bar, it repeats indefinitely, so it's 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to times both sides by 100, just to get this to be 41.66666, because then I know that that is 2/3. I know this seems freaky, but I don't know what to do. I honestly don't know what else to do. Yeah, so I've got one note here, and I'm going to times those sides by 100 just to get rid of the decimal. So we'd have 100 over 3a minus 25b, because 100 would cancel out with a 4, equals 41.66666, because it repeats, so 41 and 2/3. I know that's dodgy writing, but it's 41 and 2/3. And now we can convert 41 and 2/3 into a fraction. What you do is you multiply by the denominator and add the top. So that's 123 plus 2, 125 over 3. I know this is so weird, but this is the only thing I can think to do. So I got rid of the decimal almost by timesing by 100 and then converting the 0.666 into 2/3. Then I converted the mixed number, 41 and 2/3, into a fraction by multiplying the 41 by the 3 and then adding the 2. So that's 125 over 3. Now I times everything by 3 to get rid of the remaining fractions. So we have 100a minus 75b equals 125. Whew. And now we can divide by 25. So 4a minus 3b equals to 5. And we also know that A plus B equals to 17. So what are we trying to find out? We're trying to find the value of A, so let's eliminate B. How do we do that? Let's triple the second one. So that's 3A plus 3B equals 51. And then let's add the two equations together. So the B's cancel out, you notice. This is the amazing elimination method. And you get 7A equals to 56. So A is 8. So that was really hard. There may have been a better way of doing it, but that's how I would do it. Okay, these people all celebrate their birthdays today. Joan is 2 years younger than Kyle. Okay, so for these kind of questions, what we do is we make the youngest person X, or whatever letter they are. So who's the youngest? Joan is 2 years younger, and Kyle is 3 years older than Lillian. So Lillian is the youngest. So let's call Lillian L, she's L. And then Kyle is 3 years older. So Kyle is L plus 3. And Joan is 2 years younger than Kyle. And Kyle is L plus 3, so she is L plus 1. That's Joan. So notice everything is in terms of L. Which of the following could be the combined age of all three people? Well, adding those three up, you get 3L plus 4. So I'm looking for an answer that's in the 3 times tables plus 4, which is, given that 4 is just 3 plus 1, it's in the 3 times tables plus 1. So I'm looking for a number that's 1 above the 3 times tables. I know 51 is in the 3 times tables because 17 times 3 is 51. So 52. That's 1 higher than the 3 times tables. And notice all the other numbers are not 1 higher than a number in the 3 times tables. And that's how you do it. Another way of phrasing this, by the way, is you could solve that equation. 3L plus 4 equals 52 has an integer answer. All the others won't have. Okay, this one, my goodness gracious. P equals minus 1 and X equals all of that. I'm just going to make up a number for N because I honestly can't be bothered to do that algebra. So let's say N is 1, then we have, definitely need a new page here. N is 1, then that's 0 over 2 minus 1 minus a half. N is 1, remember, and that's 2 over 1, so that's 2. Okay, this is what X equals. 0 over 2 is 0. 1 minus a half is a half, and then there's a minus sign, so it's minus a half. Minus a half times 2 is minus 1. So X is minus 1, and P is minus 1. So Px is minus 1 times minus 1, which is 1. So answer is 1. Okay, saves so much time just by picking numbers. All of this stuff here, I'm noticing I'm getting a little bit tired, but only 12 minutes to go, so it should be okay. This is private healthcare, public healthcare, and the total is this massive number. By approximately what percent would private healthcare expenditures on the combination of hospital care and care home have to increase to equal public healthcare expenditures on the same categories? Okay, so private on hospital and home. Hospital and home. That is, wait, which one was it? Hospital care and home care. Hospital care is a 30.4. Home care, I'm guessing it doesn't include nursing home, but home care is the 1.2. So overall, it's about 32%. So 30.4 plus 1.2, about 32%. 32% approximately of 1 million, or whatever that is, 1 trillion, because it's in millions. That would be, whatever, 30%. Wait. 1,000 million is a billion, so 1,000 of those, yeah, it's a trillion. So 30% or roughly 32% is roughly 1/3. So 1/3 of a trillion is about 330 billion. So roughly 330 billion. By what percent would that have to increase to equal the public healthcare expenditures on the same? and that was 4.5 plus 5, so roughly half, just over half. That's 430. So 430 versus 330. So let's bring up a calculator. How much would it have to increase? Well, it would be difference over original. So 430, that's the gap of 100. 100 divided by the original where we started. It would have to increase by about 30%. I did round a bit there though. Yeah, 51%, just over half. That is about 430. And these two is just under a third. It's more like, yeah, I think that's 330. It's pretty accurate. 33, that's the closest by far. Tough. I had to round a bit. I think it's that. Okay. Which of the following statements can be inferred from the information given? Indicate all that apply. Private expenditures on physician and clinical services exceeded private expenditures on all other shown categories, excluding hospital care combined. Physician and clinical services. That's 30. Exceeded private expenditure in all other shown categories, excluding hospital care. No, because that's 30.9, whereas the others are going to have to add up to roughly 40, because 30 plus 30 leaves 40 left over, so no. Public expenditures on nursing home care are less than twice as much as private expenditures. So what is private expenditures first? On nursing, that's 5%, so roughly 50 billion. That's 50 billion. Double of that is about 100 billion. And is public expenditure less than that? Public is 10%, which is 85 billion, right? 85 billion. And that is less. That is less than twice as much. It's less than 100. This is so tough. I have to do a lot in my head. Private expenditures on hospital care were more than half as much as public expenditures on hospital care. So public expenditures on hospital care is 42. So just under half. So call it 400 billion. Private expenditures were more than half. So is it more than 200 billion? Is private more than 200 billion? Well, 30%, yeah, 30% is about 300 billion. So that is more than half. Whew, a lot of rounding to save time. Otherwise, we just can't do it. These guys are positive integers. When x is divided by y, the remainder is 6. When a is divided by b, the remainder is 9. Which of the following is not a possible value for y plus b? These kind of questions. Think about it. If x is divided by y and the remainder is 6, y has to be at least 7. Because if y was 6, then how can you have a remainder of 6 when you divide by 6? If y was 5, how can you have a remainder of 6 when you divide by 5? It doesn't work. The thing you're dividing by has to be bigger than the remainder. So y, given that it's an integer, has to be at least 7. B has to be at least 10. 7 plus 10 is 17, so it can't be 15. Okay, this one. If s equals that, and a increases by that and that, then what percent? Ooh. Okay, I'm going to pick numbers here. So I'm going to say that b is 2 and a is maybe b is 2 and a is 3 or 4. So if b is 2, that's 4, b squared is 4, 4 times 4 is 16. So s is 16 originally. Now if a increases by 50%, so that becomes 6. It was 4 before, now it's 6. B decreases by 20%. Damn, I should have used 10. Crap, I'm going to do this again. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to use 10 because I want to change my number because I want to be able to decrease by 20%. So if b is 10, then b squared is 100. And I'm going to keep a as being 4. 4 times 100 is 400. So originally s is 400. Now B is going to decrease by 20%. So B is now 8 and A increases by 50%. So A is now 6. 8 squared is 64. 64 times 6. 64 times 6. Let's do that. Let's do that in my head. But 360 plus 24, 384. So S has actually decreased by 16 over 400. So let me get my calculator again. So it's decreased by 16 compared to the original of 400. So it's a 4% decrease, so minus 4. Put a negative for a decrease. That's tough. Don't really have time to check. In the rectangular coordinate system, a line passes through those points. 0, 5 and 7, 0. Okay. Which of the following points must the line also pass through? So it goes from 0, 5, so it crosses over at 5 here, and 7, 0 here. So it goes down 5 across 7. Down 5 across 7 would be 14 minus 5. That would be another coordinate. Is that there? 14 minus 5? Oh yeah, D. Straight away I got it. I was going to go in the other direction, which would be like minus 7 and then 10. But that's not there. So it's 14 minus 5 because it goes across another 7, down another 5. The expression that is equal to, so simplifying these kind of ones, what we do is we times by the conjugate. I'm not sure if I have done a video on this actually, maybe not. So you times by 2 minus root 3. 2 minus root 3. I'm rushing a bit, so the handwriting is dodgy. So the top line becomes 6 minus 3 root 3, while the bottom line should cancel out. So you get 4 minus 3, and the rest cancels out. It's 1. Don't have time to explain because the time's running out. So 6 minus 3 root 3. That's that. Okay, last one. What? Another one on this? That's so unfair. I've got 3 minutes though, I think. Yeah. If private healthcare expenditures on hospital care were that, which of the following is the closest to the percent change decrease from 2007 to 2008? That doesn't seem too bad. So private healthcare on hospital care. So private hospital. So that's 30.4% of that total. I might as well work it out properly because I've got time. I don't need to round anymore. So 30.4% of about, what was it? I'm going to call it 1,027 times 1,027. And the answer will be in billions. So that was 312 billion in 2007. So 312 billion. And now it's 291 billion. 1,000 million is a billion. So what's the percent decrease? Well, the percent decrease is the difference over the original. So the difference, we just take away 291. So the difference is that 21 billion divided by the original, which is 312. So about 6.8% decline. There you go. Happy with that. I'm not going to bother going back and then checking my answers because I just want to see the results. Oh, and I'm getting tired now. Okay, so I don't think I got 100%. It just felt like there were too many questions in this test that I wasn't sure on. Section break? What? I'm done, aren't I? There is one final section to do. Now, obviously, this is just like the real test where we don't know which section is the experimental one. I thought that Manhattan would do as other sites do where they don't include an experimental one, but one of those was experimental. And I don't know which one it is, meaning I've got one more section left, which could itself be the experimental section. So just for you guys, I'm not going to skip it. I'm going to do this one properly as well. Please do leave a like or a comment if you appreciate this much hard work I'm putting in just for you guys. Okay, I'm going to start the timer and we're going to do as I did with the other two verbal sections. Enjoy it, go slowly, have fun. Though not as something as the more famous Newton, Leibniz was equally something In fact, his method of calculus notation remains the form preferred by mathematicians. Though not as renowned as the more famous, it means kind of famous, Leibniz was equally something. Influential, because it says his method remains, it still has influence today. So that's what I would pick. I am quite surprised by this book review, and while I am not certain the author of the article intended to be as something as she came across, it's clear she did not enjoy the novel. Okay, if she didn't enjoy it, she didn't realise how unsparing, how harsh she came across. During a time when critics of fiction are often excessively generous, however, it is refreshing to read something sincere, however severe, yes, severe, unsparing. Because usually critics are too generous and being too nice. There is nothing quite like the decadence, the enjoyment, the lavishness of state fair food. At a time when even food trucks something elevated cuisine, peddle, like sell elevated cuisine, it is refreshing to find vendors of such homespun yet indulgent dishes having success at the fair. I think homespun is a good opposite to indulgent. Like it's made at home and yet it's indulgent. It wouldn't be the other two. They're too negative. So yes, happy with that. The measure succeeded in aiding the economy, but senators something the imagery used on the paper currency. Rather than depicting something of national ideals, the bills featured portraits of little known and currently sitting government officials. Representative This argued that this was a something of the Treasury's power and hoped to pass a law forbidding currency from depicting living people. Okay, so the senators didn't like this imagery. So they bristled at. This was in one of my recent vocab videos. They were angry about. Rather than depicting familiar paragons, people who were epitomes of virtue. Nascent means new, and that's the whole problem. Disputed, no. We want people who are established figures. Rather than depicting those kind of people, familiar paragons, they depicted little known people. Representative This guy argued that this was a flagrant abuse of Treasury's power. If the guy wants to forbid it, it's not going to be something regrettable, it's too light. Okay. Her talents as a researcher were revelatory, like a revelation, a surprise, even rebellious, as evidenced by her something study of the organism's evolutionary stability. Probably iconoclastic, because that's like rebellious. The other two wouldn't really fit with her being a rebel. But while her genius lay in asking heretofore unconsidered questions, her struggle lay in answering them satisfactorily, as her reports often lacked clarity, with a confounding, confusing style and impenetrable conclusions, hard to understand. They lack clarity, so they're impenetrable. Garrulous means talkative. It's not really the issue here. Translucent could work, but I think confounding is better. Causes, although confounding, I always forget this word. Confounding the problem. Like translucent kind of would fit because it's like not fully clear. But then if it's translucent, it's not having clarity. But then confounding, I was pretty sure meant like confusing, causing surprise, mixing something up. I just think that's better. Translucent, you still can see through it. So you're kind of saying it's partly transparent, so it's not strong enough. Okay, Though it began dully, boringly, with little flair, the performance built to a finish filled with impressive bravado, bravery, courage, theatrical flair. Yeah. Okay, really enjoyable RC coming up here. After a peak in the early 1970s, the rate of vehicle traffic deaths in the Netherlands underwent a remarkable decline. Great. Decreasing by 80% over the next 5 decades. This statistic reflects a broader international trend caused in part by improvements in vehicle safety. Nice. However, attributing the decrease in deaths to this factor alone would require ignoring unique cultural and political phenomena that have shaped the country's traffic patterns. Interesting. In the 2 decades following World War II, residential areas in the Netherlands were overwhelmed by the burgeoning vehicle traffic created by an economic boom. So they were overwhelmed by all the vehicles because of the economy. This drove the vehicle mortality rate among children to high levels, sparking a successful popular campaign and series of protests known as Stop the Child Murder. The public motivation was high due not only to the fatalities but also to the prevailing view that the country crowded with cars was rapidly becoming noisier, busier, more polluted and less pleasant. I've been there, it's now hardly any cars. With the public's eye on the traffic problem, improvements in urban planning received strong support, creating a virtuous cycle in which citizens, emboldened by the increasing prevalence of safe infrastructure, conducted more of their trips on foot and by bicycle and fewer trips by car. Nice. This cycle, excuse the pun, was strengthened by the introduction in the 1990s of strict liability for motorists. A driver who injures someone with a motor vehicle is in most cases automatically considered responsible for the incident. In the modern day, the road system of the Netherlands reduces the speed of motor vehicle traffic and discourages interaction between cars and other road users, increasing safety for all while making non-motorized modes of travel faster and more efficient. The fraction of trips conducted by bicycle, for instance, has gradually increased to more than 1/4 nationwide. Outside of major highways, cars in the Netherlands are no longer viewed as the transportation method of the future. Rather, they have taken on the role of guests, tolerated by other road users only so long as they behave. Very interesting. The passage is primarily concerned with, we want a vague answer covering all paragraphs if possible. We're not just talking about the peak, so not that one. Not comparing to other countries, not B. It's not really advocating. It's a bad verb to use. This article isn't really advocating anything. It's kind of summarizing what happened. Defending, I think E. It's very broad. Explaining, there's no subjectivity there. The reasons for a change. All of these paragraphs contain some reason why there's been a change. So I like E, nice and broad. According to the passage, the decrease in traffic mortality rates in the Netherlands can be attributed to all of the following except. So one of these is not a cause. I think A was a cause. I think B was a cause. I don't remember speed limits. Do you remember speed limits? I don't remember there being anything about speed limits. So, unless I'm forgetting something. Definitely D, there were protests. And there definitely were laws about responsibility. So I'm going to go for C without even rereading it because I can't remember anything about speed limits. Okay, it can be inferred from the passage that which of the following changes would be most likely to increase the proportion of trips conducted by bicycle in a particular area. So which of these would most increase the proportion of trips conducted by bicycle? A is okay. B, not really talking about bikes. Educating, it was never about education, I don't think, in this passage. D is good. Reducing the number of motor vehicles registered. It did say discourages interaction between cars and other road users. So that fits with A, right? It separates them off. It discourages interaction. Reducing the number of motor vehicles doesn't necessarily, because people could just use them more, even though there's less of them. E would put people off using a bicycle. So I think A, just because there's support in the passage, inferred means you need proof from the passage. And it did talk about how the road system reduces and discourages interaction between cars and other road users, and has all of those benefits therefore. And as a result, the fraction of trips conducted by bike has gone up. So I think A has support. I mean, you could argue for D if there are less vehicles, but that just means less vehicles registered for use. They could still, I don't know, maybe share vehicles or something. So I think A. Yeah, I think A. Select the sentence in the second or third paragraph of the passage that justifies the popular support for the changes. That justifies the popular support. The public's motivation, that's the public support, was high, here's the justification, not only due to this, but also due to that. I think that justifies the popular support. Yeah, why not? I think these other sentences don't really talk about public support. I mean, this describes the popular campaigns, but then this one justifies that support and says, here's why it happened. I think that sentence, yeah. Back to the even more fun stuff. The Park Service promised that the new nets would prevent rock slides, but when injuries continued after the construction concluded, many travellers opted to visit in the area altogether. So obviously, if injuries are continuing, then you're going to avoid visits to the area altogether. Even though they're promising it's safe, the injuries have continued, so people are going to opt to avoid, and eschew, avoid means as well, visits to the area. The playwright's something reaction might have seemed incongruous, like not fitting in, given the rave reviews of the play's opening weekend. So maybe the playwright reacted badly, even though they're getting rave reviews, but she is too exhausted and relieved to revel in her success. So she's not reveling. So what's her reaction? She's not reveling, and it's strange, incongruous, her reaction, given the good reviews. Disgruntled would kind of fit, but then there's not another word. Disgruntled means kind of annoyed, but then it said she was exhausted and relieved, not annoyed. So I think muted and subdued, quiet. She's exhausted, that's why she's muted, quiet and subdued. And people are surprised because she was successful. Proving the something of rain for many societies, not just those considered agrarian, rural, rituals, or farm-based I should say, rituals intended to invoke rain are documented in historical accounts of cultures the world over. Some weather modification rituals are still performed today, proving the import of rain, the significance, import and significance. Evincing, like proving the importance of rain. For many societies, these rituals are found the world over, and some still continue today. I'm not talking about shortage or unfairness, so yeah, definitely that. This feels a bit easier, this one. Most were kept in the dark, but a select few committee members, because in the UK we have select committees, that's why I got confused. Most were kept in the dark, but a select few, a small number of committee members were told, because most were kept in the dark, were kept secret from this information, but a few had access, were given the requisite power to set the following year's budget, were accorded, were handed over, were conferred, handed over, given the powers. Doesn't really fit with being kept in the dark so much. That's more like not having the information. I guess that could also mean being powerless. A select few committee members were accorded, conferred. Stymied, stopped. They weren't stopped. Cautioned, no. Privileged is good, but it doesn't really fit with another word, so I think C and E works best. Okay. The scientific community has long held that human hunting patterns were the primary cause of the extinction of mammoths from North America. Human hunting patterns. And that this extinction had come quickly. The youngest mammoth fossils from the region are 13,000 years old, a date that closely aligns with the proliferation of humans to the further reaches of the globe. The marriage of this evidence led scientists to develop the Blitzkrieg hypothesis, which held that overhunting rapidly destroyed the North American mammoth population. Indeed, other species, such as the dodo, have been known to disappear completely within a few hundred years of their first contact with humans. But when researchers in Alaska found frozen samples of mammoth hair and skin cells, this prevailing theory was called into question. Oh dear, what did they find? DNA analysis suggests the frozen artifacts range from 8,000 to 10,000 years old. Ooh, much more recent. If accurate, the new assessment asserts that mammoths survived on the continent for even thousands of years after the arrival of humans. What then was the undoing of these great mammals? Some biologists still argue overhunting was the cause even then, just at a slower pace. Others see climatic to do with the climate factors as a more likely cause, citing evidence of an island-bound mammoth population believed to have run out of fresh water, and of migrating mammoths drowning due to thinning sea ice. Interesting. So primary purpose, a nice vague broad answer that encompasses both paragraphs. Not climatic factors, that's only the second paragraph. We're not comparing to other extinct species. Yes, explaining why a theory introduced in the first paragraph is being challenged because of the second paragraph. Not D. It's not trying to resolve the dispute because the author doesn't know the answer, so not E. Which of the following statements about the frozen samples of mammoth hair and skin cells can be best inferred or kind of proven from the passage? Just quickly look back at that bit. So that's the relevant part. The samples were found through DNA analysis techniques that were not previously available. No, didn't say anything about that. The samples led scientists to revise the estimated date of the mammoth extinction by at least 3,000 years. Well, yeah, because it was 13,000 and now it's 10,000 at least. So it does say if accurate though. But then this does say estimated date. So B's looking pretty strong. It was not previously known that samples of hair and skin cells could clarify. No, that's not necessarily true. Maybe they realized before that hair is useful, they just didn't find it that was 8,000 years old. The samples provided further evidence for the Blitzkrieg. Definitely not, it's the opposite. The samples were only found because of changes. We don't know that, so B is by far the best. Parkwood, unlike other school districts in the state, requires student athletes to see district-approved doctors for the annual athletics physical exam mandated by the state. So it has to be district-approved doctors. Other school districts allow student athletes to see any doctor of their choice. Clearly, this is the author's conclusion, so we have to really focus. Clearly, Parkwood's more restrictive policy increases costs for student athletes. Why is that? Just because you have to pick one doctor? Although Parkwood student athletes pay more for the physical exams than student athletes in other districts, altogether, not although. Altogether they pay more, even though Parkwood is not the largest school district. So the author's saying because of the policy, that's going to increase costs and they pay more for these exams than other students. Interesting, I'm not sure of the link though. Just because they have to see district-approved doctors, why does that mean they have to pay more? Which of the following is an assumption? By the way, in the real exam, because I've got 9 minutes left for 4 questions, I can go a little bit slower. Which of the following is an assumption? Definitely not that doctors earn more annually. How much they earn might not link to how much they cost. The cost of medical care within the boundary of Parkwood is higher than the national average. We're not talking about the national average, so that's not good. C, different athletes have different physical fitness requirements. Definitely not. We're not talking about the doctors and the cost. D, fewer doctors operate within the boundary of than anywhere else. We're not talking about the number of doctors though. E, there aren't more student athletes. Because notice in the conclusion it talked about altogether the student athletes pay more, even though it's not the largest school district. Well, it may not be the largest district, but if there are more students than in any other district, of course they would pay more. Or to quickly show off the negation technique, which I've demonstrated in other videos, if we say the opposite to this, there are more students in Parkwood than the other school districts, then of course the conclusion is dead. If there's more students, that's why altogether they're paying more, in total, in sum. Even though they're physically, geographically not the largest, they've got the most students. So definitely E. Also, all the other answers weren't great. 18. In the town of Thurndon, all eligible voters are assigned to cast their vote in the mayor election at a specific neighbourhood polling centre, so you have to go there. A 2005 survey conducted by the Board of Elections determined that 46% of the town's residents knew how to find out which polling centre they were assigned to. That's pretty low. In 2006, the Board of Elections for the first time distributed flyers and hosted informational sessions educating citizens on how to determine their assigned polling centre. At the end of that year, a similar survey showed that 62% of the town's residents knew how to identify their polling centre. It appears the Board of Elections information campaign was successful. That is the conclusion. It appears that. A bit like the word therefore, or clearly, or must, or ought, or should, or would. All of these clue words to show that we're talking about the conclusion. So we focus on this. But is it necessarily true that it was the information campaign that helped? For example, I can almost predict an answer here. If there was an election in 2006, say, then of course more people are going to know where their polling centre is because during that year they had to go and find it. So it wasn't the information campaign, it was the election. I bet they're going to pick that as the answer. Which of the following most seriously weakens the argument? Damn, it wasn't that. Oh well. Okay, A. They also made phone calls. But it's still their campaign though. That still counts as their campaign, doesn't it? The mayor was very unpopular. That's a bit too indirect. The number of polling centres decreased. Would that help you find it though? I don't see how that would help you find it. Although the percentage of residents who knew how to find their polling centre increased, the percentage of residents who intended to vote did not. We're not talking about intending to vote though. Oh, what about E? Many people who did not know where to vote in 2005 were students, and the majority of these students moved away from Thurndon. Okay, so even though it's got the word many, which I don't normally like, I think E's correct because it says that the reason the percent went up isn't because more people realised, it's because the people who didn't realise left. So of those 54% who didn't realise, a big chunk of them were students and they just left. And so the remaining people, the percentage was higher who knew. So it wasn't the information campaign. To be honest, I'm kind of getting this just because the others are pretty rubbish. So I'd pick E there. Okay. The phenomenon of female authors writing under male pseudonyms or false names in order to secure publication is both historical and contemporary. From the Bronte sisters, Charlotte, Anne and Emily, who wrote under the names this, this and this, respectively, to J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series, who reportedly was asked to write under her initials rather than her first name of Joanne in order to appeal to readers of both genders. For centuries, faced with cultural and commercial pressures, women have published work under names intended to disguise or obscure their gender. That's sad. In recent years, however, a reverse trend has emerged in the genre of crime fiction. Men are assuming female or gender-ambiguous pseudonyms, hilarious, in order to tap into the popularity of women authors of thrillers. Indeed, the trend is an ironic one and is likely based on recent studies showing that more women than men read books, including crime thrillers. Interesting and fun. The primary purpose. To summarize the history of women authors? No, definitely not the history. Describe a surprising publishing trend and explain why it's surprising. I mean, that kind of fits because the second bit is the surprising trend and the first bit kind of explains why it's surprising because it used to be women. So B is decent. Argue against the decision, definitely not. Defend the usage of synonyms. The author isn't really weighing in though, it's just sort of describing. Defending is too strong a verb. The author doesn't really care as much, they're just kind of sort of describing the situation. Present multiple views on the reasons an author. Not really. Where are the multiple views? They don't talk about anyone's views on this. So I think B fits. It covers both bits because the surprising trend is that men are now doing it, and it's surprising because it used to be women. Okay, last one. For the following question, consider each of the choices separately and select all that apply. According to the passage, which of the following factors have contributed to authors using pseudonyms? External societal forces. Yes, women facing cultural and commercial pressures. Consumer trends in a particular genre. Yes, women buy more books and therefore men are starting to pretend that they're women. A cultural reversal of historical bias. Do we know that that bias has been reversed? So there's the cultural bias of not wanting to read women for men. But then that hasn't been reversed. Well, it does say reverse. It says a reverse trend has also emerged. But it doesn't say that the original trend has gone. Oh, that's tough. On the last part of the last question, I found something that I'm struggling with. A cultural reversal of historical bias. It's not a reversal though. I know it uses the word reverse here, but it's not a reversal in the sense of it's not like the bias is now the other way. That now men have cultural and commercial pressures. Because where are the cultural pressures on men? It's only economic pressures on men because they want women to buy their work. It isn't a cultural pressure. So it's not a cultural reversal. I just don't like C. I just can't pick C. If he's right, I think they're wrong. And finally, we are done. So let us find out how I did. And we will hopefully be able to quickly look at the answers. So 168, 168, that's roughly what I expected, but let's find out quickly the ones I got wrong. So verbal 1, I'm only going to go through the wrong ones. Obviously, I got every single one right there. That's nice. Okay, and verbal 2, women's rights. Okay, devilish, they say. I was torn on this one. Does it provide women with opportunities to demonstrate a moral character similar? I was so torn. It was such a 50-50 question. And they say it did. Read explanation. Whereas it all depended on how you viewed what she thought. She argued that women appeared different from men in moral character due largely to the different opportunities and the social expectation that they concern themselves with frivolity. If the question just ended with provide women with opportunities to demonstrate moral character, then I would agree, but she also felt they were inferior. So that's a really tough one. This happened actually before my real test. I got a 337, I think, in Manhattan, and then I got a 340 in the real test. So I do think some of these are slightly more debatable. What? I thought C was proven. Natives of the islands produced a nutmeg spice. Locals, natives, harvested and sold the nuts of the tree. And the tree we're talking about is the nutmeg tree. I guess it's saying that they didn't necessarily make the spice. They sold the nuts but didn't make the spice. Ah, it's a rookie error. Okay, some of the disputed territory was first annexed. Where was that? Where did it say A? One island remained in the hands of the British. Yeah, but I interpreted that as being like the very first time in history that they were annexed was the British. It could have been the French first. So I don't like that answer. It's not fully proven because it remains in the hands of the British, but we don't know that they were the ones who first annexed it. It could have been the French or maybe the Dutch originally, then we took it, the British, and then the Dutch took it back. So I actually don't like A. I can see why C is wrong, but I don't actually like A. Might say I'm a sore loser, but that's my answer. All the rest are right, which is great. And you notice how the one section that I make errors was the not experimental. But then in the experimental, I don't make any errors, but that's not the one that counts. That's so unlucky. So I probably would have got a 170 in verbal, but for the experimental being the third one. Oh, well. Okay, this one. Ooh, where did I make the error? I rushed this one, under 29 seconds. Oh, that's embarrassing. I did it in my head as well. 360, he uses a quarter, which is 90. During the second week, he uses a fifth of the remaining. Oh, that's 270 left. I rushed it in my head. It was 270 left, not 250. Oh, that's embarrassing. Shows you why you should check your calculations. I did say at the time, always check your calculations, and then I didn't. I tried to show off in my head, but never do that in the real test, obviously. And the other one, wait, got nothing wrong. So one mistake gets me a 168. That's hilarious. Either way, I really hope that this full Manhattan test has been helpful. I would say there was really one error that I hold my hands up to, which is using my mental maths for that math question, which is silly, and I made a mistake there. The two verbal are highly disputable, although my answer about nutmeg was probably wrong. Definitely, I can hold my hands up to that because they didn't produce a spice. But not too bad in all those sections, kind of one or two clear errors. And most importantly, it's not about me though, it's about did you learn? Did you see how you can stay calm and enjoy the test throughout, even those longest of long verbal sections? You really can enjoy it. And the math, if you know the tricks and you practice and you enjoy picking numbers, even that can be enjoyable and you can crush the test. Do let me know if it helped at all, and see you in the next video.